Evening and welcome everybody. I'm Vanessa Dal Busco, Acting Vice Chair at Iod Central London. Welcome to Micro Credentials, Adapt Now or Be Left Behind. Please let us know where you're dialing in from today by typing in the chat box and let us know what you do too. So we can see people joining now, which is fantastic. Welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining this evening. Micro Credentials, Adapt Now or Be Left Behind, brought to you by Iod Central London Education Special Interest Group. We can see more people joining. Fantastic. Great to see numbers rising. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, Julian from Beaconsfield. Lovely to see you. Thank you. Hello, Chris. Good to see you. Chris Lindley. Wonderful. Excellent. David from Ipswich. Great to see you. Fantastic. Good to see people coming in now. If we could have the next slide, please, Amanda. Thank you very much. We have a fabulous agenda planned for this evening with a tremendous panel, very exciting discussion to come. There are two ways you can engage today. Many of you have already discovered the chat function. We recommend you to change the audience to say all panelists and attendees so you can interact with each other too. If you have a question for the panel, please put it in the Q&A box. We recommend you use the Q&A function because we'll not be checking the chat for questions. So questions in the Q&A, you should be able to like the questions that are your favorites. That makes sure we answer the questions that you want answered. Questions into Q&A, go in there and like your favorites. Final way to engage today is watch the chat because shortly we'll be posting a link to a LinkedIn post. Please comment on the post to engage with fellow attendees. Once again, that link will be posted shortly in the chat and will be a great way for you to connect with each other by commenting on the post. Questions in the Q&A, interact in the chat and comments on LinkedIn. After the main event, we'll open a wonderful networking session. This is a great opportunity to meet your peers in a fun and relaxed Zoom environment. Please grab a glass of something and join us. We'll post the link in the chat towards the end. This session is being recorded. And now I'd like to hand over to David Stringer-Lamar, Chair of Iod London Region.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed, Vanessa. A storming, professional, micro-credential, accredited, no doubt, performance. Fantastic as ever. So my name's David Stringer Lamar. I'm Managing Director of a company called Fortis Consulting London, Strategy Director at Medical Prime Clinic in the City of London, where I've just got back from. So I've been in the city today in London. I'm pleased to say things are moving along. There's many more people, in fact. Possibly not so green, but I can certainly assure you there are now traffic jams. So traffic jams are in fact back in the city, and the tube was quite busy as I was coming out. So standing up and people there. So we're back here. The unlocking is beginning, which is great news indeed. So I have the great honor of being the chair of the Institute of Directors London region, the powerhouse region, as I would call it, within the UK family. We all engage together, the UK bits of the IOD and the international branches as well. Here within London, of course, we have two branches. We have the City of London branch. There you can see the Shard just across from there. And we have the very strong, the world's biggest branch, which is Central London branch, which is bringing you this excellent session this evening. I'm very grateful to Vanessa, also the chair of Central London branch, Rena Dial, and of course the very dynamic empowering chair of the Education Special Interest Group, Joe Warner, that you'll be hearing about shortly. Now you can see up here we have Business Extra. So I'm very proud of the team because obviously last March, a whole year ago, can you believe it, when the doors of the IOD actually closed, and they're now open again, we had to move into the virtual space. And it's been a fantastic learning journey, and it means we're reaching out to so many people. So thank you very much for joining. As you can see their new name for new times, Business Extra, adding value to membership, authoritative, influential, and insightful. Those words could have been written for our excellent panel members that are coming up. So for those of you who don't know too much about the Institute of Directors, we were founded back in 1903, Royal Charter in 1906, and three of the main things we talk about is developing our directors, because obviously better business leaders are good for society, and that's part of what we're talking about here, improving and development. We're also very much around the concept of influencing. So influencing government, and gosh, you can imagine the amount of conversations that are going on, not just here in London, but also nationally as well. And the third one is about connectivity, connecting people. So Vanessa there has encouraged you to put your details in the chat. Let's get connecting. Tell us about yourself, tell us about your company. Let's get things moving together on this one. Now, here you can see, should you not be a member of the Institute of Directors? Ooh, what a strange idea. Why would you not be a member of the Institute of Directors? Anyway, should you have not seen the light at the moment, here are a number of the benefits. Legal and tax helpline line, the meeting spaces are opening up here, and professional development you'll be hearing much more about later on. But really, it's about connectivity, it's about business information, it's being part of a community. And I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, over the last year, I've really, really appreciated, my company has, the community, the fellowship, as it's put up here, that exists between the members. So do think about engaging with that one. And also, of course, Central London branch, and there are branches elsewhere indeed. I'm really looking forward to this. This is going to be great. Micro-credentials. Vanessa, back to you.
Thank you very much, David. And now we'd like to run a poll. You should see that on the screen in a couple of seconds. So are you a student, a higher education provider, a trainer or coach, a business owner, or an employee? I'm going to close that poll in 5, 4, 3. Oh, results still coming in. A couple more seconds. You can see them moving up now. Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to end the polling. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And share the results. So we can see business owner and SME at 38%, followed by professional education, higher education, corporate leader, and student. Great to have those results there. Thank you very much. And now moving on, I'd like to introduce the host of tonight's event, the chair of the Iod Central London Education Special Interest Group. She's an educator, lifelong learning promoter, and founder of 2 education companies. Welcome, Jo Warner.
Thank you very much indeed, Vanessa. And thank you to David as well. Following on from what you've shared with us already, the priorities of the education group are to build communities, empowering collaborative communities through engaging events such as this one. So please do join in the chat link and grow your community with us. Right. I would like to introduce our speakers, if I may. Now, the speakers are so accomplished. If I were to go through all of their achievements, we wouldn't have any time to listen to what they have to share with us and learn from their insights. So, first of all, we will have Professor Mary Bishop, who is a senior global education strategist with a vast range of experience. And he's presently lobbying the UK government through think tanks on subjects of micro-credential. We have Professor Julian Birkinshaw, who is a Deputy Dean and Professor at the London Business School, a Thinkers 50 leading global expert on disruption and renewal. And then we have Mia Kleregård, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Mia, with over 26 years of experience in global leadership across a range of industries, the last at Tesla and now in the space industry. So over to you, Mary.
Thank you very much, Jo. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience with micro-credentials. So my career as an accountant has been at the crux of academic and professional qualification. As Director of Learning at the ACCA and in universities, using social learning platforms, working with MOOCs, including edX, FutureLearn and Coursera, designing education products, delivering digitally and globally for lifelong learning and skill building. I think we all recognise the macro trends in the shifts in global economic power, demographic shifts, rapid urbanisation, climate change, resource scarcity, and of course the rise in technology, which has been really accelerated by COVID. The drivers of change, globalisation, digitisation, regulatory change, changing expectations, add to these trends, and COVID has really shone a light on the skills gaps and the need for a lifelong learning approach to developing skills. So one response to digitisation as a disruptor, which first came out of the first decade of this century, around 2008, was MOOCs, massive open online courses. And the key features then was they were open to all, no limit on size in terms of registration, free of charge, and of course digital delivery. So they tended to attract educated participants. There were poor completion rates because people were really snacking on learning. They weren't going to them to get accredited certification. And many of the MOOCs offered quite generic courses. So by the end of 2018, over 900 universities globally had announced or launched nearly 12,000 MOOCs. Within that stat, some new trends, so less courses being added each year, so a more focused response, an increase in paying customers, so people started putting in a pay gateway rather than offering everything free, and greater usage of traditional qualifications in some ways. But we're here to talk about micro-credentials. The brief landscape that I've set out is important because micro-credentials are a response to these macro trends and drivers of change, and are often delivered by MOOC platforms. So the first question really has to be, what do we mean by micro-credentials? So if we look at this first slide, I'm talking really here not about training, and not about CPD, which is certified with attendance. And that's because there's no assessment of learning engagement and no assessment of the skills learned. So digital badges like Microsoft and Cisco are often referred to as micro-credentials. But the thing is, micro-credentials have really yet to be defined. So the only reference point we have was developed by the European MOOC Consortium, and it's known as the Common Micro-Credential Framework, the CMF. Now, it's not actually formally recognised anywhere, but informally it's recognised and it is useful. So it's a definition by characteristics. So as I've put here on this slide, the characteristics defined for micro-credentials are the size, about 100 to 150 hours of learning, and about 25% of that tends to be delivered, and about 75% of that tends to be self-driven. Using the typical university approach, so 150 hours of university credit would give about a 15 credit micro-credential from this framework, providing it has a summative assessment. So really about the same size as a single master's module. And of course, we would, for it to count as a micro-credential, need to verify ID and issue a certificate and a transcript as well. The thing is, this framework only applies to the final year of a degree or to postgraduate. And the reason for that is because it's aligned to CPD. But I would question why we don't have a fully stackable framework from foundation right the way through, offering shorter bite-sized learning, an approach with step-off. And that's clearly the research coming from Gen Z and also from the employment market. So if I could have the second slide, please. So the question's always, well, who can accredit? What about quality assurance? And the answer is, typically we might think a university or college is needed to accredit, but actually it's much broader than this. So professional bodies like CIPFA, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, which is recognised by the Financial Reporting Council. The Institute of Directors diplomas are credit rated and benchmarked by the Scottish Qualifications Authority. And the London Stock Exchange has accredited its short course with the British Accreditation Council. And all those accreditations focus on standards and quality through the lens of governance and risk. So we sometimes talk about whether the qualifications, whatever size, are high or low stakes. And really this can apply from tiny nano badging right the way through to a postgraduate degree. And basically it comes down to, will it qualify me to undertake a task? So if it's high stakes, then it probably will. So for example, in the medical, legal, accounting fields, then most of the credentials tend to be high stakes. So I've already mentioned the Common Micro-Credential Framework and that it's only at the graduate and postgraduate level. In reality, a micro-credential can be drawn from any level. It's just a way of packaging learning into a qualification. So if we use norms like hours and levels, like any college or university or professional body uses, then actually anybody can accredit and deliver through this process right now. And it is what the market wants, and the market's voting with its feet. And interestingly, more and more employers are using the strength of their brand name to deliver their own qualifications without any external quality assurance or recognition. So, for example, the fairly recent innovation, the Google certificate. So originally, when MOOCs arrived, the narrative was really about these new edtech providers replacing traditional higher education. If you look at the US market in particular, this is in the last decade, I would say, shifted to a model of partnership. So, for example, US coding boot camps are brought into universities. Thinkful's a good example of that. And MOOCs are reinventing themselves to deliver and extend university offerings by offering small qualifications, but which are recognised by the accrediting university and often partnering in delivering that learning too. So this is all possible within the sector currently. However, there are two things that hold many of the actors back. And the first one is really important, it's funding. So the government funds qualifications currently with a focus on the final goal. So a degree apprenticeship, for example, being the final goal. And this needs to change to a lifetime skill building approach. And there is some movement in this area with the Prime Minister's recent lifetime skills guarantee. The other reason really is down to mindset. We need to recognise across the sector that we can do things differently. We can work in partnership, break down barriers between professional, vocational, academic, and work together, focusing on skill building and identifying emerging skills and developing smart, agile responses that are built collectively and delivered accessibly, drawing what's best from all of those different areas. And universities are certainly starting to work on this agenda. So Staffordshire University, for example, with their collaborative framework, which breaks a traditional module down into micro modules. So in my final slide, if we could just move to my final slide, I've collected together some of the benefits. I'll just mention a couple of definitions. On my previous slide, I referred to stackable qualifications, and by that I mean literally qualifications that sort of stack up into each other. So from very tiny right the way through to a postgraduate degree, and nested qualifications, and that's where certificates or diplomas, which have value in their own right, are sitting within a bigger qualification. So in my final slide, I've collected together some of the benefits of engaging with the micro-credential agenda. And I'd like to leave you with one final thought. In a 5-year period, your skills and that of your workforce will lose half their value in terms of currency, efficiency, and effectiveness. So I'd say if ever there was a reason to adapt now, that was it.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much indeed, Mary. I have so many questions, but I'm going to stick to just one. In regards to UNESCO's Sustainable Development Goals in relation to the education policy, they state that the inclusion of digital credentialing is a must. So can you, very briefly, could you expand upon that, why and how?
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, I'm a huge fan, as many people are, of the sustainable goals, and I think that they're central to everything that we do. So digital credentialing really addresses learning, assessment, qualifications and certification. And across these areas, the digital methodology is really important because digital offerings can extend reach. So to geographical areas where there may not be ready access to traditional institutions, to disrupted environments such as war zones. And of course, the recent shift to digital provision in the pandemic has been a way of continuing provision, whether it's school or university level. Much of the digital provision is more affordable than traditional. It's also more flexible, with the chance to study for shorter periods, with shorter commitment times and step-off points that are credentialized. So reach, affordability, flexibility are all important dimensions of accessibility, social inclusion and equity. And also the learning content and delivery may draw more easily on global expertise in a more accessible way. So offering knowledge of other economies, for example, and facilitating portability. So digital credentialing offers really important tools for inclusion, for equity, and for mobility, but there are issues. So digital infrastructures may be problematic. And I certainly found that in my capacity building work in Nepal and Africa, for example. Academic integrity and certification authenticity can also be a challenge, but none of this is insurmountable. So phone technologies, for example, are helping with infrastructure. Donors are now more aware of digital poverty and are offering aid. And if we use increasingly sophisticated technologies to proctor assessments for identity and record certification for authenticity, so for example, blockchain technologies, we can work to overcome those challenges. So I'd say digital credentialing offers tools with potentially huge impact for the UN Sustainable Goal 4 for inclusive, equitable, quality lifelong learning really to be available to all.
Thank you, Mary. So with the 2030 goals, as you say, within 5 years, we need to start thinking about it now. So we're at the start, there are challenges, but they're surmountable. Thank you very much, Mary. I would now like to hand over to Julian, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jo. Thank you, Mary. If we can get the slides up. I'm going to speak to what I know, which is the world of business education. And I'm going to be speaking about micro-credentials, not just as an opportunity, but also as a threat. And, there's going to be a little bit of me, which of course worries a little bit about this trend, but I'm going to try to be fairly balanced in my point of view. Could we have the first slide? I've got 2 slides. The first slide is the way I look at the business education market. Very, very simple point. On the left-hand side, we have anybody, and there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of providers who are providing various aspects of business training. And obviously we've got the established universities and business schools such as London Business School. We have this hugely fragmented training industry from big consultancies through to literally, sole traders who are providing their services to small to medium companies and indeed large companies. And then you've got this massive and fast growing group of online providers. Mary mentioned, for example, a company like Coursera, which is based out of California. Coursera has courses on pretty much any issue you want. They're basically free to register for. Go to their platform. You can type in whatever it is you're interested in, and there will be a course, an online course available for you. And of course, that has grown because of the internet, and it's allowed this baffling, set of things to sort of take shape that most of us are really struggling to get our hands around. So one way of making sense of this is to then look to the demand side of the equation. And here the story is conceptually much simpler. I mean, who is in the market for business education? Well, there are students entering the market. There are people perhaps who are retooling because they're looking for work. There are people who are already in roles who are seeking to advance, who are looking to get additional skills. Those are the users, the direct users of these educational offerings. And then at the bottom of this list, and arguably the most important part of the story for reasons I'll come back to, are the employers, the people who are buying the services of the people who are getting educated. And certainly in my worldview, the employers play a very, very large role. Now, if you look at the middle part of my diagram here, the way that London Business School and indeed most business schools think about this is there's a distinct separation between, on the one hand at the top, our degree offerings, our MBA degrees, our Masters in Science degrees. We don't actually offer diplomas and certificates, certificate with a capital C, but we could do. And the point is that these are formally accredited degree and sub-degree activities. There is a thing called the Quality Assurance Agency that most of you have never heard of. I've had to work with them quite hard over the years, and their job, not unreasonably, is to verify that we are actually upholding very high standards in terms of who's allowed into the programs. Are people actually learning the things that we said they were going to learn? How can we verify that, in fact, we're giving away valid degrees? Higher education is a formally government sanctioned and accredited activity. And we separate that out very, very clearly from the stuff at the bottom of my list, which is the short courses, a week-long course on leadership or digital strategy. It could be a couple of days. This is the Wild West in some ways, because there is no accreditation at all. As Mary quite rightly said, if there is a certificate, it is a certificate of attendance, not a certificate of achievement. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that, because as long as there's willing providers and willing buyers, then that is a legitimate thing. And my point is that these things have been separated completely in our world. And yet now along comes micro-credentials in the middle there. And micro-credentials offer this opportunity or threat that says, what if we found ways of taking these short courses and finding ways to kind of accredit your learning, your achievement in those things, and then you kind of stack them up and say, look, we've learned enough here that actually you've earned the right to a degree. And we at London Business School are looking into whether we should be doing that. We are not doing it yet, let me be very clear, but we absolutely could do. So the big challenge is to what extent micro-credentials will take off. And I want to go to my second and final slide to address that question. And the way that I'd like to answer the question is by this schema here, which looks at the proposition we have today and the proposition that might emerge on the right. The analogy here is to the newspaper industry. In the good old days before the internet, we would buy a newspaper, and that newspaper was actually a bundle of offerings. It was news, it was classified ads, it was print ads, it was TV listings, it was opinions, it was lonely hearts, it was a bunch of stuff. And as soon as the internet came along, that proposition was unbundled because it was possible for example, classified advertising in cars or houses or whatever, to pull itself out from the newspaper and offer itself as a separate service. And of course, what that did is it completely destroyed the business model of the newspaper industry. Newspapers are hanging on, by their fingernails, as it were, to try to stay viable in today's online world. And arguably, the same thing is happening, or at least could happen, to the world of business education, or even, if you want to take the biggest view of this, of the whole world of university education. Because when you say to a student, why do you want to come to London Business School? The actual fact-based learning is a tiny part of what they're coming for. On the left, I've actually kind of divided it out into three clusters. There's the learning piece, which is partly fact-based, partly experiential. There is the sort of network building piece of this, which is access to colleagues, peers, employers, and so forth. Some people have literally, signed up for this because of the social opportunities as part of the offering. And then on the bottom right, arguably the most important bit of the lot, is the credential building piece. Why do people pay a lot of money to come to London Business School? Because they know that it's going to be very rigorous in terms of the selection procedures. They know that we're going to be lining up high quality employers to come and recruit from London Business School. It is a sort of a high status thing, and people put a premium on that. And the big question for us, and indeed others, is the extent to which, given digitisation, and then given COVID, which of course has accelerated this trend, what extent this unbundling of the classical MBA degree is going to take place. Because it's absolutely clear that our students can actually can cognitively learn online just as much as they could before. But what the students are not unreasonably saying is, hang on, I paid a lot of money to come to London Business School, and you're going to give me this online experience. I'm not getting all the networking that I wanted. And I completely understand that point of view. I am still getting the credential building piece. But, you can make a case that as the integrated offering starts to kind of come unstitched a little bit, that you can imagine alternative providers coming in and saying, we're going to do bits of this for you. And for me, the crux of the story, and I'm going to finish with this, the crux of the story is the whole credentialing piece. In other words, the nightmare scenario for London Business School is indeed that Google or McKinsey or somebody like that says, you know, frankly, we are now going to start offering our own degrees, and we're going to use micro-credential methods to actually build up the credits and give people degrees, and we don't need Iod London Business School anymore. And of course, if major employees start doing that and saying, we don't want to come to campus anymore to interview your students, then that is actually the biggest single threat to our existence. So what are we doing at London Business School? We are absolutely experimenting with online courses. We have created so-called MOOCs and SPOCs, various online offerings, in order to understand how to deliver that stuff. And we have not yet, but we might have to at some point in the future, started thinking about how we'll actually turn those micro learnings into micro credentials. So I'm going to finish there. There's much more I could say, but we've got time in the discussion. I will absolutely acknowledge, as Mary said, that when Google is offering career certificates, when Dyson, James Dyson's organization, is starting to offer its own degrees, that's when I start to get a little bit worried. And indeed, the entire higher education industry can potentially start getting worried at that point. So that is the threat/opportunity, depending on where you sit in this system. And I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed, Julian. Oh, right. So to both sides of the coin there, I understand why micro-credentials have become so important with the speed with which tech and everything is growing. Yeah. Now, the other side of the pandemic, we have this VUCA world. Yeah. So with regards to leadership, leaders are having to completely change the way in which they lead their organizations. Mm-hmm. So in what are your thoughts with regards to the pros and cons in relationship to both recruiting and leadership?
So, I mean, as you say, the world is changing before our eyes. The demands on leaders and indeed employees at all levels are changing rapidly. People are absolutely, as Mary said, having to learn and develop their skills in order to keep pace. And the question is, to whom should they go to get that learning? And of course, this is not going to be a winner takes all world. In other words, we will see a coexistence of traditional big established providers, as well as online providers and micro-credential providers, who are all sort of addressing that opportunity. And the point is that we as an established player have to be ever more vigilant and ever more rapid in building courses and learning to address those needs, because we know that the competitive market out there is gathering pace. It's always going to be true that small providers will move more quickly than big providers. And so, we are going to see all of these different players in this ecosystem sort of scrambling to provide, the latest thinking on leadership, digitization, or whatever. And certainly we are trying to do that. The question is, essentially, who will come up with the most compelling proposition first? Now, that does create, for people on this conference, huge challenges in terms of where do we go to learn this stuff, because the answer is everyone is trying to meet your needs, and some of frankly are doing it better than others are.
Thank you very much indeed, Julian. Thank you indeed. I would like to hand over to Mia. Mia, if you would like to share your story with regards to global leadership and the use of micro-credentials, and also going forward with them, that would be great. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Joe, and thank you for having me. And I know we're running a bit late, and I know also it's very important to make room for questions and networking. So I will be brief, and I just want to actually jump on to Julian and what he's been speaking about here, because I think what we're going through now is really important in so many senses. I embraced my first leadership position 25 years ago. I'm getting old, but my career has been filled with loads of learnings, loads of lessons, but also so many amazing experiences. But I think that being an executive, being that in the times of now, we also have to always stay curious. And especially being where we are now with the development, as we can see, not only being in the pandemic, which really gives us room for reflection, to learn and to see, but also to address the challenges ahead. And that's something that we really need to do now. And 7 years ago, and I can only go to myself to kind of grasp everything that we've been speaking about, to be kind of an example in this field. 7 years ago, I heard so much about AI, machine learning, deep learning, robotics. Everyone was speaking about it. And I somewhere along the way realized that this is going to impact me, not only in my executive position and my leadership, but also in society and the business and how to run it. And I had to go and get the knowledge. And as I am, as Julian also said, we seek knowledge and we seek where can we find the best knowledge. And what I was interested in was the future of technology. So where can I learn that? And I took an education within Singularity University within Silicon Valley to actually understand the exponential effect and impact on the future of technology. Coming back home, I also embraced the CEO position within an urban farming company, and urban farming didn't even exist 10 years ago. So somewhere along the way, as both Mary and Julian has been saying, we need to speed up the way we educate and the way we credit and everything that comes with it to actually match everything, because society is changing and the workforce and the work environment is changing. So and after that, I also understood there's a lot of other emerging industries that I want to be, to stay on top and to be attractable for an employer, but also to be a leader. I need to understand the future, to inspire others to follow my path, to create momentum. And then I need to understand it. So my next level was to understand the space industry. And I took a degree this August to understand what will and how will the emerging space industry impact the business on Earth today, and what's my role in that, being a leader and liking to be a forefront leader. And I think that somewhere along the way, I'm just like a living proof that during our lifetime, we need to be curious, we need to be eager to learn. There's no one that's going to come and tell us what we need to learn. We need to go out and find it, and we need to adapt to it also, because the workforce not only being in the forefront, but everything is changing around us today. Society is changing, the technology we use is changing, the skills that we need for the future is changing. Some of the top skills, especially in the leadership, and I know David spoke about it leading into this conversation, also being the professional development, especially within the executive area. We need to understand that the skills coming forward is a lot to do with collaboration, a global mindset, also to be creative, and also the soft skills that also comes in a more complex world where we're moving into now. We need them ones, especially in leadership and executive environment. So I think that's something that's really important.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed, Mia. Now, rather than I ask you questions, I want to open it up to our audience. And what I must also say is there will be an opportunity for you to continue this conversation in our networking with the speakers afterwards. So Vanessa, over to you for the questions.
Thank you very much, Joe. Fantastic panel discussion. So now I'd like to open the Q&A, and we do have so many questions coming in. We definitely will not be able to answer all of them, but please stay tuned for the networking, attend the networking, because that is when we will answer the questions that we can't answer here. So Faye Watkin asks, are micro-credentials and digital learning badges the same concept? Let's go to Julian first, please.
So for me, they are quite similar. In other words, well, let me put it slightly differently. It depends on whether the activity is being assessed. And you see, the key thing here is, am I just simply going through a piece of work and getting some sort of badge that says I've completed it? Or is there some mechanism that verifies that I've actually learned something? And for me, that is the key thing. So just to call it a badge doesn't tell me whether somebody has actually learned something or not. You know, the moment that the mechanism has to be, you've got to be able to sort of show that somebody, as it were, graded your assignment and prove that you learned something. And it's a bit messy. I mean, Mary can speak much more to the sort of the regulatory or sort of standard setting efforts to try to create some sort of consistency of approach here, because at the moment, you know, the question sort of alludes to the chaos that exists. I mean, Mary, do you want to shed a bit more light on how these words are being used?
Yeah. I think just in terms of terminology, I mean, the word badge tends to be used for something smaller. So typically for 5 credits, for example, might be referred to as a badge or a nano credential. Micro credentials, if you recognize the framework, and as I say, you don't have to recognize the framework, but if you do, then you would expect them to be 10 to 15 credits, possibly going a little higher, possibly going a little lower. But Julian's really coming to the central points there of quality assurance and assessment. So most badges do have some sort of assessment, I would say. Many of them are competence-based, so they're very much skill-based, whereas academic learning is more about knowledge and skills and critical thinking. So there is a difference. That many badges are job role related, so they're very specific, very niche. You know, they might be export-import badge, for example, so you have to know a particular sort of legislation, or there might be a Microsoft or a Tableau badge, which is a particular skill in developing dashboards, for example. So micro-credentialing really is about credentialing, which means assessing, and within that somebody being credibly ID'd as well, so we know it's the right person being assessed, and then a credential being issued to that person. But badges do tend to be smaller.
I think I just want to add into the dialogue. I think also it's really important to also see the bigger picture, because sometimes we get stuck in small, because also, as Julian addressed, we have a big challenge to address the challenge as well, to understand that we need to change and we need to adapt now, and we need to change the way we're educating and the way we also take education. And I think that's something that we need to do them both at the same time, because actually education is being disrupted as we speak now, and a lot of industries is being disrupted by the future of technology. Education is just the next one. So I think somewhere along the way we need to see the bigger picture to address the challenge ahead, and to see how we can work together, because we have a whole population on earth that needs education in various forms. So we can't, so I think that's really important to stick to that as well.
Thank you very much. Some really interesting answers there. And now a really interesting question from Davey. So comparing micro-credentials to traditional qualifications, do they both generate the experiences that people need to develop their careers? There's many questions in here. Are courses filling the gap and generating soft skills, hard skills, and changing the performance of users for better jobs or as entrepreneurs? Mia, can I start with you on that one, please?
Can you take it again? I really didn't get the whole question.
Comparing micro-credentials to traditional qualifications, do they both fill the gap and generate soft and hard skills and change performance of learners for the better, for jobs or entrepreneurs in the same way?
I'm going to give like a political answer on this one. I don't think the one takes out the other one, because I really think we need both. But I think that somewhere along the way we need to embrace the new way of educating our people, and I think that's something. And to see that we need to embrace the soft skills, it goes to preschool. It's not like only higher education. We left that part out, and we left the part out how to collaborate, how to work with the soft skill, your creativity. Not saying we left it out totally, but we're not so focused at it as we need, because what we're going to do in the future, we're going to have so many challenges to address, that those skills and those like kind of a mindset is really really necessary. So I think the collabs and everything that goes, and I think it was Mary that mentioned it in the beginning, it's really important. So I think we have to build like a new arena that we actually provide education. And I think we need to do it in very various forms, because we have AR coming our way. That's like the coolest way of learning STEM. So, and if I'm not a kid anymore, but maybe I can do it, and you're never too old to learn, but learning like that in an AR and a VR environment, it's just like education, it's going to blow your mind.
Can I take a slightly different sort of angle on the question? Many of the audience will have heard of the so-called 70-20-10 principle, which it's been sort of disproven in terms of empirics, but it basically says, you know, in terms of how business people learn, it turns out that 70% it's argued of learning happens through challenging work assignments. It happens on the job. 20% through essentially talking to and getting feedback from peers, and only 10% through formal training courses. Now, the ratios don't matter. The point is that when we discuss credentials, we tend to get a bit too stuck in the 10% piece. In other words, the formal, formal objective, sort of logical learning piece. And we don't spend enough time talking about the experiential on the job part of learning. And it is definitely true that credentialing learning is so much easier when you're learning fact-based subjects than when you're learning experience-based subjects. So my answer to the question is essentially that we mustn't get stuck with the credentialing part of further ongoing education for business people, because a lot of that business learning actually happens on the job.
Yeah, I would just say I totally agree with those points. I mean, we've got to be outcome focused, and how we get there needs to be appropriate to what we're trying to achieve and how best to achieve it. And in terms of soft skills, I mean, I think that's incredibly important and across every sort of education. So when I was Director of Learning at ACCA, I relaunched the qualification embedding soft skills within it. So 20% shifted to soft skills, and that was a real step change for the accounting profession. And it was incredibly hard to do, and we recognised it in all sorts of ways. I did it through the assessment methodology, for example. I took the assessment online, and then I embedded within that some of the soft skills, so through presentation, through use of technologies. So you weren't testing use of technologies, you were requiring the answer through those use of technologies. So there are lots of different ways that you can do it so that you get to the end of producing what's effectively a 360 education that continues and is lifelong engaging and developing. And I think that's the shift that Mia's talking about, is we just need to focus. We need to look at the horizon more and see what we need to be preparing for, as well as what we're actually needing right now.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for those answers. Time for one more quick question before we move into the networking in a few minutes. And it's quite a controversial one from Kagila Balakrishnan. Hello. So Kagila is concerned about the quality of micro-credentials, maybe because of the absence of a teaching and learning experience, as online courses alone can't provide that. Mary.
Well, I guess I would push back as a governor and director on an online university, Arden University. I would say actually that teaching, learning and assessment can all be done digitally, face-to-face, and through a blend. And the technologies, I probably would have agreed with that far more sort of 15 years ago, but I mean the technologies are phenomenal now, and using mixed reality, having a VR strategy, bringing in holograms, there's so many exciting ways we work now. So I would never move away from I'm saying we need personal interaction as well. And I would always say that we need different things at different times, and we need different things for different subjects and contexts and where we are in our learning journey. But I would never dismiss doing anything fully digitally or anything fully face-to-face or hybrid. I mean, I think all of it is possible, and quality assurance can apply to any methodology. And what we're looking at here is we've already got a higher education framework that actually accommodates micro-credentials. We just don't use it that way. We've got the QAA, which owns that framework, and in one of my roles, I work with that with the Office for Students, and there is no reason why it can't be applied in exactly the same way to micro-credentials. So all the tools there, but as I said in my opening piece, one of the blockers in this country is the funding. We look at whole qualifications, and the other blocker is mindset. Because we've not done this before, we think we can't. Of course we can.
Fantastic. And it's 10 to, and I'm so sorry, Julian and Mia are not going to have a chance to respond to that right here, but networking is the time when we can discuss that. I've just finished my law degree with Arden University. Great experience, by the way, Mary. And now I'd like to introduce Lisa Maltman from Iod Professional Development. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you all for having me here today. I just want to do a very, very quick introduction to tell you a bit about who I am. So as Vanessa said, my name is Lisa Maltman. I'm a Strategic Account Manager in the IOD. And just on the topic of micro-credentials today, I felt it would be remiss of us not to let you all know that, for those of you who don't know, we offer professional development at the IOD along with our exceptional IOD membership that David spoke about at the start. So we have a huge range of programs, accredited and non-accredited. All of our courses are all based on this Director Competency Framework. This is the IOD Director Competency Framework. It is made up of 15 core competencies that we believe directors need to be a really good, effective director. You can see there they're broken down into skills, knowledge and mindset. Amanda, if you just flick on to the next slide, please. So our flagship module, our flagship program rather, is the Chartered Director Program. Mary mentioned in her presentation earlier on that both our certificate and our diploma are accredited by the Scottish Credit and Qualifications Framework. And the final slide, Amanda, will just show everybody today, give you an idea of the levels and credits that are attributed to these courses. So as I said, a very, very quick introduction to say hello. Please connect with me on LinkedIn, Lisa Maltman. If you have any questions about our qualifications, about any of the key outcomes, learning objectives within them, please get in touch. I'm here to help, even just in an initial conversation or to point you in the right direction. We have a fantastic policy team as well within the IOD. I think Joe Fitzsimmons is on the call, who leads our education piece. So please keep in touch, a bit like the membership thing, here to help. Great to meet you all. Thank you so much. Back to you, Joe, I think.
Thank you very much indeed, Lisa. Yes, so much detail there that please do connect with us and find out a bit more about what we can offer, but that's not what it's about here. Today, we are all about finding out about micro-credentials. Please join us for the networking afterwards to ask more questions of our panel. And then before we end the session, I would like to hand over to our acting chair, Rena Dole. Rena.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everyone, for being here. What a fantastic conversation. If I've been making my notes here. And clearly, I think so. Great takeaways for me. My name is Rena Dal. I'm the acting chair to IOD Central London. And I want to thank each one of you for joining us. Absolutely brilliant. And our speakers have been spectacular. I mean, I love that newspaper analogy, Julian. I'm going to use that for explaining the whole concept to someone. It's really good. And Mary, your call out about 5 years' time, 50% of our talent will be requiring requalifications. We better get started. And Mia's own personal journey and call out is also something that we need to notice and do something about. Great conversation today. Thank you very much. So as you would have recognized, that what the IOD does, apart from the amazing courses that Lisa talked about, is that we are in a way offering to our members something which is quite special, which is connecting on different webinars. And webinars like the one that you have attended right now. So I'd like to just share with you and give you a line of sight about some of the upcoming webinars, which are not only great opportunities to learn about cutting edge items, which is what we're talking about. So you can see on the slide out there, so you've got some fantastic items, and you'll see there's a range, right from speaking about LATAM business opportunities to the interviews with the best of the best right now in the industry across the spectrum, to flexible retirement plans. So we've got a huge range, and that's because our membership is so diverse, and we'd like to speak to all of them. And Central London itself has got some amazing special interest groups across international trade, tourism, education, music and arts, ERP digital, the Young Directors Forum. So they're great opportunities to connect with us. But I'd like to invite you to go to Iod London Events and sign up for these events because they're free. So spread the word and join us, not just for learning on such topics, but also, as everyone has been talking about, for networking, which is such an important aspect. So yes, that's the slide. On the 7th of April, welcome to LATAM. We're going to have ambassadors joining us. We're going to have experts from the various countries, Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, Caribbean. If you want to trade in those countries, great opportunity to be part of the conversation. Do sign up and join us for that event. But I'm going to hand you back to Vanessa, who's going to talk about networking, because as we've been talking in today's conversation, so important, and most of our learning takes place not just from the education that we get, but the networks that we create, and that's an integral part of what we do at the IOD. So I'm going to hand back to you, Vanessa, on that one.
Thank you very much, Rena. It's a delight to work with you on the IOD Central London Committee as acting chair. Wonderful to see. And I would also like to say thank you very much to David Stringer-Lamar, who is the chair of London Region, and this is officially David's last event as chair of London Region. So David's tenure is coming to an end because there is a limit to the tenure that ambassadors can serve. And David has been instrumental in London's growth and the success of both Central London and the City of London.
Thank you, Vanessa. And while I echo that thanks that you've given to David Stringer-Lamar, all of us who know David, we know he's going to stay connected. We continue to be collaborating with him and making London a stronger region for the IOD. So yes, thank you very much, Vanessa, for that. And thank you, David. But we know we will stay connected. The journey continues.
Okay, and now we'd like to invite you to join the networking, which is a fantastic place to meet your peers. Go and grab a glass of something. We'll paste the link to the networking in the actual chat. So if you open the chat box, copy and paste the Zoom link, pop it into your browser, and we will hope to see you there in a few short minutes. So we'll give everyone a few minutes to actually copy that link. Any problems, just pop it in the chat there. We're actually running early this evening, which is unheard of. So you could join us for 2 minutes and you would still get out on time. Mind you, you probably won't leave after 2 minutes because it's so great. People really enjoy the networking. Plus we'll get to answer all of those questions that we didn't get to answer in the session because there were so many great questions. Helen, I know you had some questions. I hope you can see us in the networking. So now I'm going to do the countdown and open the networking. 10, hope to see you there. Thank you very much for joining. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. See you in a second.